Right, well, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Larissa Allwork and I'm from the University of Northampton School of the Arts. I have a background in art history and also the public memorialisation of the Holocaust and Nazi era pasts. I've been invited here today by the artist Pam Foley to give a talk on visual artists and public memorials, and also to try and begin to see how some of what Pam's work fits into sort of the broader ideas that I've encountered in my practice as a cultural critic and historian. So the first thing that I want to begin with today is to talk about what is a memorial and what is a monument. And there are lots and lots of different definitions. But today I'm going to use James E. Young's. Now James E. Young, who's a very prominent US art historian and who has written extensively about Holocaust memorialisation, has said that a memorial may be a day, a conference or a space, but it need not be a monument. A monument, on the other hand, is always a kind of memorial. So we can see that a monument is a subset of memorials. A monument can be the material object, sculptures, installations used to memorialise a person or a thing. And they can be celebratory or they can be mournful. So thinking about what Young has said then, we can interpret Pam's work of art, Roots of Sorrow, as a monument in the sense that it is a multimedia art installation set up as a triptych and incorporating the imagery of the bird and the dried rose. Although the imagery of the rose in Pam's work is sort of clearly, has a very deep personal iconography for her, what is interesting within my practice is the way in which the rose has been used in other works of art as well. And so looking at a kind of handout that I prepared, it particularly makes me think about James Lee Byer's work of art, The Rose Table of Perfect, which adopts a sort of similar idea of the rose at one hand in the sculpture being in full bloom when it's first installed, and then over the course of time in installation in the gallery, sort of breaking down, showing that temporal quality of nature and death and decay. In a memorial context, of course, as well, the rose is deeply ingrained within sort of British consciousness associated with the November armistice memorialisations, and more recently the Tower of London memorial to World War I. So those are the ways in which Pam's Roots of Sorrow can be seen as a monument. But in Young's terms as well, I think that we can also see it as a memorial, in the sense that it has been incorporated into many different spaces and activities, which have explored the nature of loss in different communities. So Pam's installation has been installed at St Barnabas Church, Oxford, and has also been part of creative spirit workshops run at St Andrew's Healthcare in Northampton and Birmingham, which both occurred in 2014. So we've basically seen now how Pam's work can be seen as both a monument and a memorial. But I want to develop on Young's idea even further and introduce his idea of the counter-monument. Now, whereas a lot of monuments, particularly when they're installed within the public space, are basically produced within a tradition of state-sponsored memorialisation, which can also often function as a centre point for thinking about sort of national ideas of memory, particularly within a sort of heroic tradition. Counter-monuments are much more challenging of this particular tradition. So Young has defined them as brazen, painfully self-conscious memorial spaces conceived to challenge the premises of their very being, ethically certain of their duty to remember, but aesthetically sceptical of the assumptions underpinning traditional memorial forms. So I'm now going to look once again at this handout and talk through just a few examples of what counter-monuments are. So one of the most famous ones, which has in fact been cited by Young himself, is Jochen and Esther Gertz's Black Pillar Against Fascism, that encouraged people to write their name on it before the pillar itself was gradually lowered into the ground. And of course, the idea of this was to try and subvert the sort of heroic tradition of monuments, which had sometimes, the iconography of which had sometimes been reappropriated by the Nazis during the Third Reich. So it was to try and create a monument that was really sort of contesting that kind of tradition and also getting people to get actively involved in making a statement against contemporary forms of fascism. Another sort of classically cited counter-monument is Rachel Whiteread's memorial to 65,000 Austrian Jews in Vienna, which was opened in 2000. Now, this nameless library symbolises the untold stories of victims' lives and suggests that they are in some way inaccessible and an absent presence. So once again, sort of installing that sense of absence within a sort of normally traditional memorial space. Now I'm going to just turn over and look at a couple of other examples which have less often been put into that counter-monument tradition, but I think could be inserted and which are interesting to consider. So we have Mark Quinn's celebratory sculpture of Alison Lapper pregnant, which was installed in Trafalgar Square in 2005. Now, this can be seen as subverting the traditional values of patriarchy and nationalism associated with many monuments erected within that square. And instead, it adds the often marginalised voices of the female experience and also the disabled to this traditional square within London. And the last monument that I also want to reference and look at is one which has just been opened in Berlin. And this is a new monument to T4 victims, or those disabled and handicapped people who were murdered during the Nazi regime's euthanasia campaign. And this is a memorial space which once again contests a heroic conception of German history and brings the voices of groups who have sometimes been marginalised into the German public sphere. And this has also been done through the use and incorporation of elements like Braille and making sure that the monument is fully accessible for disabled people as well. So, considering all of these different public memorials then, you could ask the question, where can Pam's work, Roots of Sorrow, be seen to fit? Well, certainly not. Pam's work is not a state-sponsored memorial space or monument. However, I do think that Pam's work does share certain similarities with the notion of the counter-monument. Its move away from themes such as patriarchal heroism and the nation in favour of alternative narratives, the loss of a mother and domestic family life. Its focus on unresolved complex notions of grieving. Its desire to encourage viewers and communities to engage with the work. And its desire to use artistic strategies to represent and open up dialogue about what are sometimes taboo topics, such as loss, disability and mental illness.